And hello, and welcome to the first attempt at Steve relearning Git. And let's see, there's a little background here. This is not your average learning Git course. This is, or learning Git series, discussion, whatever. It's not a course. but this is me relearning how to use Git. So if you've used Git casually, you may know that it can be a tiny bit complex. And I the background is I have been doing .NET development for many years, and when I switched to Git, I relied upon the little, what do they call it, team plugin, pane, window, whatever, the UI box in Visual Studio that managed the Git commands for me. So I only use the UI and I only use the features that were available in Visual Studio at the time. And like in Visual Studio 2013, it was pretty rough. It improved slowly. And now as say Visual Studio 2019, the latest version, update, service pack, whatever, it has a fair amount of functionality and works pretty well. But in the early days, it was kind of rough. So a couple problems with this. One, I was doing things wrong, just fundamentally wrong. And two, I really didn't know what I was doing in the interface. I was clicking buttons and things worked, but it's this weird user interface that does things in Git and you don't really know what's going on. So my problems were, one, relying upon the Visual Studio UI to perform Git operations. And yeah, so I didn't really know what was going on behind the scenes. And what happens is when you encounter a problem, you'll get this bizarre, nonsensical error message and you'll have no idea how to recover. And so you basically have the old joke, you have to make a copy of your code, you have to fix the problem, and then you have to just kind of roll back or create a new repo. And I've literally had to create new repos because I just couldn't resolve the problem that was occurring in Visual Studio Git commands. So that was number one. So through that, I was clicking buttons that did Git things. I had no idea what it was doing and couldn't really use the tool properly. Second, because I was going through that interface, I was very limited on the set of features I could use. And it worked fine for basic operations, but there were many features in Git that I'm completely unaware of and was unable to use through that UI. And second, I was using I was using those Git buttons in a way that may not have been and likely were not proper. And there were better ways to manage the code, better ways to manage branching and versioning and all that stuff. And actually part of that was the UI and part of that was I would just forget. It was often, vast majority of the time, it was just me working on one project. So it's like, well, I don't need a branch. Sure enough, I'm in the middle of development. This happened yesterday, I think. Middle of making changes for a new feature. And I find there was like a minor issue with the release. So it's like, okay, I can't go fix that issue and prepare a new release. I'm in the middle of development. I didn't create a branch. I can't switch back to my main branch. So it's like, okay, I need to hurry up and get this new feature done, or I need to, get creative and roll back things, and it's just a mess. So anyway, with that background, in this episode, I would like to cover some basics, and I'm not going to attempt to explain Git and how it works and all the architecture. I'm just going to go through some steps and see how it goes and practice. This is me really trying to figure out, okay, what do I need to do? How do I do it? What's the proper way? What's the command? What's the button? And I'm having to relearn how to do this stuff in Visual Studio Code with Azure DevOps. And I'm used to using Bitbucket with Visual Studio, and Bitbucket and Azure DevOps completely different. In UI operation, how they do things, what they call things. And then Visual Studio Code is also very different than Visual Studio. So I'm just relearning all of this stuff. And in the process, I'm going to try to improve practices, better understand what's going on, and test different situations to just see what happens, figure out where to find information I need, and kind of explore with a test project, of course. I do not want to be doing this with a live project. So that's what this journey is. So with that said, let's break some stuff. Okay, so we are going to Studio 4. Okay, so here I have Azure DevOps on the left, and I have a notepad on the right to try and take some notes about what I think I want to get done. So I have this organization, I believe it's called, in Azure DevOps that I called BC Learning. And it's just an empty organization that I can create projects, delete them, do whatever I want, and not worry about it. Okay, so I'm going to start by creating a new project in Azure DevOps. Click. I'm going to call this project Test 1 and Test 1. I'm going to make this private since nearly all of my repositories will probably be private. If I were to do a public one, I might use GitHub instead. So I'm going to do private. Now under advanced, there's version control. I'm going to use Git versus Team Foundation version control. I guess they don't call it TFS, it's TFVC. And this work item process, I haven't really looked into these features, but I'm going to avoid Agile, Scrum, whatever CMMI is, and I'm just going to go with basic for now. Let's just see what they say. I think I looked into this before. Basic when your team wants the simplest model that uses issues, tasks, epics to track work. Agile when you want to use Agile methods, including Scrum, Kanban board. I wouldn't mind in theory using Kanban board, but it's probably overkill for my needs. And then there's Scrum. Yeah, so just different project methodologies. So let's stick with basic because this is more about Git than about overall lifecycle management. So I'm going to click Create. So it is now creating a new project within my Azure DevOps organization. Okay, so welcome to the new project Test 1. So now I have this Azure DevOps project, Test 1, in my BC Learning organization, and it defaults to the overview summary page. And there's some other stuff in here, but we're not going to mess with this because this is about Git. So I'm going to go straight to repos. And it seems when you create a project, it seems to automatically create a repo based on the name of the project. And I don't know if it is possible to create multiple repos within a project in Azure DevOps, or if they're essentially synonymous, like a project has a matching repo, but the project also has boards, pipelines, test plans, artifacts, and all those other things. I don't know if you can create an extra repo in here. So I'm just going to assume it's one-to-one relationship. Now that I've created this repo, the one step that I think needs to be done before I move forward is to initialize the branch. There are probably a couple other ways to do this, but I think that if I immediately clone this branch in Visual Studio Code, I have problems because I can't start working in VS Code because a branch has not been initialized. So I thought, okay. Now you can probably initialize the branch in VS Code, but since I'm here, since I'm looking at this page, I'm thinking it'll just be a good practice for me to initialize the main branch from within Azure DevOps immediately after I create the repo, so that it's just one less step to screw up in VS Code. Now, strangely, I can initialize this if add readme is checked, because my impression is it needs to be initialized with a file of some sort. You can't initialize an empty branch. So if I uncheck this, there's a git ignore option, but as soon as I uncheck add readme, I can no longer initialize. So fine, I'm just going to add a readme and I'm going to click initialize. Okay, so it initializes with this generic readme file, and I don't care what's in there. So now I have a main branch, and now I can clone it to VS Code. So I can click on, let's see what's in here. Okay, I don't want to fork. So I'm going to click on clone, and it gives me a few options. I can do a command line clone, or I can copy this URL, and you can use that on VS Code to clone. Or this button actually appears to be pretty cool. This is clone in VS Code. Let me see if I can make that bigger. Okay, so I can just click on clone in VS Code, and I found this is pretty slick. So rather than mess with using the URL, using command line and futzing around, I've just made mistakes and done things wrong. For me, I can click this button and it prompts me open in VS Code. So it is pointing to some type of file extension or whatever, like VS Code : it's piping it to VS Code, whatever that is called. And I'm going to click on open via Visual Studio Code from the browser. And so it's saying allow an extension to open this URI. Great, VS Code, VS Code.git wants to open this URI. Fantastic. Okay, so it's asked me where I want to save this local version of my repository that I'm cloning. I'm going to go with documents AL, kind of that seems to be the default directory for AL projects. Now, I've made the mistake of going in here and creating a new folder for my project. So like creating a folder test1. That is a mistake. All you need to do is specify the parent folder, and the git clone process here will create the project folder for you. So just specify the parent folder being AL, select repository location, and it will clone it'll create the directory for the project and then clone into that directory. So if I go here is my AL folder. You see I now have a test1 folder. So that's kind of handy. It's a mistake I've made many times, is creating the project folder, and I could never remember in Visual Studio, wait, do I create the folder, not create it? I could never remember where it creates it. So that's kind of nice to see. So now I am in, what happened? No folder open. That's weird. I thought I cloned. Okay, let me try that again. So this is the weird stuff that happens. Like, wait, I swear that I did that right and it didn't work this time. There's my test1. There's my Git, but it did not open it in Visual Studio. Okay, maybe I clicked the wrong button there. I'll have to do instant replay to look at the video. So I'm just going to delete test1. It's kind of a nice thing is I'm creating this repo from scratch. It's a local repo, so it doesn't matter. I'm going to try that again. Clone in VS Code, open Visual Studio, and maybe I hit cancel. Open, select folder, documents, AL, select repository location, open. Okay, so I did something wrong there. Again, very, very easy to make mistakes in this process. Like one misclick and you're like, what just happened? Okay, so here we have, let me close the welcome page. Here I have my test1 project and a readme.md file, which I believe is a markdown file. I'm going to delete all this stuff because I don't care about it. Okay, and I'm going to say, this is the test1 project. I'm going to save that file. Now, notice I am still in my main branch. And one lesson I need to force myself to learn is stop coding in the main branch. Stop it. So here I have main. I'm just going to initialize this, clean it up. This is a test1 project. Control S to save. Let me turn on screencast mode. Okay. Control S to save. And let me scoot this over. Let me make it a little bigger. Wow, that is massive. Okay, so now you'll notice I have main star, and then I have, make this bigger. If I click on the Git extension here, and by the way, if you don't have that, you will want to have something like Git Lens. I have Git Graph and Git Lens installed. Those are the extensions I have. So that is providing me with the Git functionality I need along with whatever is standard in VS Code. So if I click on my Git page here, you see I have readme.md, and that is under changes. So it has detected that I've made a change. Okay, if I hover over this, it shows that I deleted this text in red and I typed this text in green. So it's like, okay, you made changes. Okay, so now that I've made those changes, make this a little bigger, close that. I'm going to click on this plus sign. And this is kind of, there's a couple ways to do this, but clicking on this plus sign in the changed file says stage these changes, saying I'm done with my changes, stage them, and basically put them in the staging area to be committed up to the repo in Azure DevOps, the remote repo. So I'm going to click on stage. And now you can combine these steps, stage and commit, but I'm going to do them separately for now. Now that I've staged them, I'm going to commit. And oh, looks like you can do the message here. So test new test1 project. Okay, so now that I've got that description in there, I'm going to click on the commit button, and it is committed on my local repository. Okay, so now you'll notice I'm still on main branch, my local repository. Okay, and I have this down here. And this is one thing I don't like about the Visual Studio Code UI. I've got main branch here, I've got changes here, I've got commit up here, then I've got the differences here. And it's like you're looking in 4 different places, you're having to click 4 different things in order to get this process done. And not a fan of that. Visual Studio was a little simpler. You set a message and commit and push. And you could just do that in one operation, in one place. Here, you're kind of looking all over the place. And if you're not paying attention, it's like, wait a minute, did I commit those changes? Did I stage them? And it just takes a little getting used to for me. So now it's saying, okay, I have one commit to push to my origin main, which is my remote branch up in Azure DevOps. So I'm going to click this. And if I get any of the lingo wrong, let me know, or the operations wrong, or some process wrong. Okay, so I've done that. Now, let's see if I can have a pretty picture. So I've installed an additional extension called, well, 2, Git Lens and Git Graph. And one of the things that Git Graph does is draw pretty pictures. So let's give that a try. And we probably won't see much, but I see there's a button here now in the source control page right at the top. I'll click on that. And we see, we have main and we have origin head and not much going on, right? Okay. So now I've initialized my project. I've committed to main. I should be able to go up here in Azure DevOps, and there we go. I see my commit, new test1 project. I deleted this stuff. I added this as the test project. All looks good. Okay, let's go back to our repo. Let's go back to VS Code. Now, what do I want to do next? Create a new project, repository, main branch, clone, initial commit. Okay, next I want to create a dev branch. So there's an entire discussion and philosophy and probably PhD level dissertations on branching strategies in Git. I'm just going to use a simple one. So I'm going to click here on my main branch and it'll prompt me. Do you want to create a new branch from? Not quite sure why I'd use that first one, but I want to create a new branch from main. So I have my main. I'm just going to create a branch off of main. So I'm going to choose create a new branch from. And my branch name is dev. Press enter. Select a ref to create the dev branch from, and that is main. Okay, so now I have a dev branch down here. Now, one thing I noticed is this dev branch is only local. So if I click over back on Azure DevOps, if I look at my branches, it doesn't know there's a dev branch yet because I've only done this locally in VS Code on my machine. So if I click here, this is to publish those changes up to Azure DevOps. So let's do that now, just to let Azure DevOps know that I have a branch. Now, I don't know if there's a reason why you would hold off on that. Creating the branch, maybe adding some files, writing some code, doing a stage and commit, and then publish. I like to publish right away so that when I'm in DevOps, I say, great, I see my branch, I know it exists, everything is hunky-dory. So let's go back to my VS Code. So now I am in my dev branch. Now I can switch to main, I can switch to dev. Okay, now I can work in dev if I wanted to. So this is code in the dev branch. Okay, I'm going to save that. Now I can stage that, commit that, and new dev branch. Okay, and now you notice at the bottom again, like I said, you're looking up, down, all over the place. At the bottom, it says push one commits to origin dev, and that's the remote dev branch. So I'm going to click on that. It's going to synchronize, and voila. Now, if we go back to here, we should see that we have our dev branch with a commit. It's one ahead. I've committed something in dev that is not in main. If I look at my commits, this is new test one project. You updated dev this is my main branch. So I can switch to the dev branch and say, new dev branch. So it has all the commits from main, but now it has dev activity as well. Okay, so going swimmingly so far. So I really don't want to work in dev branch because I kind of like the branching strategy that is a feature branch strategy. So I'm going to add a new feature to this project. So rather than working in dev, I'm going to create a new branch from. And let's call this feature 1. And this will be based off of the dev branch. So I have, let's see, main, dev, and now I'm creating feature. So I'm going 3 layers deep here, and it can be more elaborate, less elaborate, more simple, whatever you want, but this has some benefits, and there's entire discussions, like I said, on branching strategy. So now that I'm in my feature 1 branch, you'll notice the little cloud with the arrow. Of course, it's a cloud with an arrow. So I need to publish changes. So I want to publish that branch right away, get that up into Azure DevOps. And if I go back to my repos, branches, there we go. Main dev feature. Okay. Now that I'm in my feature 1 branch, I'm going to work on feature 1 code. This is a new feature. Okay, so that looks good. I've just coded up my new feature in the feature 1 branch. I've saved it, and it says, I don't know what the asterisk means. I guess there's changes. So the source code control has detected that I made a change to my file. I'm going to stage and commit and developed feature 1. Okay, And now you see that it's saying, hey, you have now committed a feature or committed a change to your file in feature one branch. Do you want to push that? Sure. Let's push. Synchronizes changes. Excellent. So now what's really cool, this is my favorite feature of Git in the UI here. I can click on feature one. I can switch branches. And you'll notice right now, feature one code, I'm going to click on dev. I'm going to switch to my dev branch and my feature one code disappears. I'm going to click on dev branch and change to feature one. I'm back in feature one. My feature one code magically reappears. This is like magic to me when I first saw it. It's really cool. So you're not losing anything, fingers crossed, and it works pretty well. And you can just switch between branches to see what's going on. So let's say I was working on feature one and I'm like, wait a minute, is this what I wanted to do? I can switch over to dev. It's like, oh, okay, yep, I'm in the right place doing whatever I need to do. So now I have feature one. Okay, cool. So I got feature one. Well, I'm developing feature one. Next to me, or in Tallahassee, Sally is working on feature two. So she would be in the dev branch and she would say, well, I want to create a new branch for feature two. I'm going to call this feature two. I'm going to base it off of dev. I have no idea what that Yahoo Steve is doing over in Los Angeles, So I'm going to create my own feature two branch independent of whatever he's doing because my feature has nothing to do with his. So I'm going to branch feature two off of dev as well. And I'm going to say feature two, this is a new feature from Sally in Tallahassee. Is that how you spell it? Okay. They have spell check in here? No. Okay, well, my apologies. Let's say she's in Miami, since I can't spell Tallahassee. Okay, so Sally in Miami. That's better. Okay, so now Sally has done work in feature two branch, developed her code for feature two, and you see there's a change. So, oh, you know what I forgot to do? So easy to forget. I did not publish the new feature branch. And let's see what happens. And I was hoping to avoid this, but mistakes kind of let me see what the difference is. So I'm going to publish this change. Now, in theory, I don't think it should publish this. Yeah, this should be an uncommitted change. So if we go back to Azure DevOps, refresh here, I should see feature two. Yep, it is only one ahead of main. If I go into feature two, yep, there is no feature one code, there is no feature two code. So great. So publishing the new branch can occur even after you've modified the code locally. As long as you do it before, maybe before commit. So not exactly sure, but I was able to just publish this branch while having made changes. So now I have published feature two. Now I'm going to stage my change. I'm going to commit my change. And what is my commit? Worked on feature two, which is awesome, by the way. Okay. So now I have a change, a commit that I need to push up to feature two on Azure DevOps. Clicking that, the magic wheel spins, and I'm in good shape, it looks like. So now, if I go to feature two, there we go. There's my new commit, worked on feature two, and there is my code for feature two from Sally. Excellent. Okay, so now let's say that Bob in Fargo, lovely Fargo, very scenic Fargo. Let's say Bob in Fargo is working on feature three. So he would have the dev branch and he would create a new branch from dev, and let's call this feature three, and based off of the dev branch. And you notice the dev branch knows nothing about feature one or two. and Bob just wants the dev branch to create feature 3. Makes sense because Steve and Sally are both in the middle of coding. Their feature 1 and 2 isn't ready yet, so he wants to proceed with feature 3. Okay, so feature 3 incoming. This is a new feature from Bob in Fargo. Okay, so let's save that. And once again, I forgot to publish my feature branch, but as we learned, it's okay. I'll just publish now. Okay, so that is published. I can go over here to branches, and I see feature 1, 2, and 3. So feature 3 is there. It is only one ahead of main because it only has our dev change, and feature 1 and 2 are 2 ahead because they have the feature 1 and 2 changes, if that makes sense. Okay, so my brain is kind of comprehending this. So Bob in Fargo is making his change. He is going to stage it, commit it, and this is feature 3. And that commit occurs. We then need to push this commit. Okay. So now, Steve, Sally, and Bob have all contributed our code to feature 1, 2, and 3 respectively. Everything looks good. So now all 3 of these developers are confident that their features are code complete, ready to test, and let's just pretend that our process is to test based off of whatever's in the dev branch. So we want to get the code from feature 1, 2, and 3 into the dev branch. So let's say I'm the lucky person who gets to do that. So I will start on the dev branch. So I'm the person who's going to pull in the code from feature 1, 2, and 3. So let's see how to do that. Okay, so I did feature 1, 2, 3, switch to dev branch, merge from feature 1. Okay, so let's start. I believe I have to do F1. I wasn't able to find how to do it via the UI. Commit branch. Oh, okay, so you can do it here. So you can click on this little ... ellipsis under source control. You can go to branch and say merge branch. You can also press F1 and choose Git merge branch here. Let's just kind of stick with the source control panel. Let's go to branch, merge branch. Now, remember, my understanding is you want to be in the branch that you will merge into. So the kind of the parent branch. So we're going feature 1, we're merging it up into dev. So I'm going to start in dev and I'm going to click branch, merge branch, and it says select a branch to merge from. The language is a little weird here. So I want to pull feature 1 into dev. So I'm going to choose feature 1 branch. And magically, the code that Steve wrote for feature 1 in the feature 1 branch now just magically appears in my dev branch. Pretty cool. Okay, so that code looks good. I'm going to save this file. And now what I found interesting here is, even though my file changed, it doesn't show up as a change. So I don't have to click stage. I don't have to click commit as far as I can tell. So it's like, let me just pretend. Merged feature 1 into dev. Look at that. No changes to commit. So I'm sure there's a good explanation, but it seems counterintuitive to me. Okay, empty commit. I don't want an empty commit, so I'm not going to do that. So feature 1 code is now in my dev branch because I did a merge. Okay, so but you notice even though I don't have the ability to stage or commit, I don't even have to do that, it does detect that I have a commit. So it's like it pulls in the commit from feature 1 into the dev branch. It's not really changing my file. It's essentially just moving the commit across branches, I guess. So let's commit that change, or push that commit, I should say. Okay, so now feature 1 is part of dev. Okay, so now I want to pull in Sally from Miami's code. So I'm still in dev. branch, merge branch, and feature 2. And look at that. Well, it turns out that Sally was writing code in the same place in the file as Steve. So this is saying, hey, we have a merge conflict. Like I have code A, code B, they both won't fit in the same place. What do you want to do? Do you want to choose code A, or do you want to choose code B? Or do you want to accept both and bring them both in? Well, obviously we want to bring in both. So I'm going to accept both changes. Now, this is obviously a simplistic example. You could have a much more complicated example where 5 lines out of 1,000 were changed on by two different branches, and merging them gets pretty intricate and elaborate. So that's where compare both changes. But we're just going to say accept both changes. If I accept current, I think it rejects the feature 2. If I accept incoming, it rejects feature 1. So I'm going to accept both, and voila. I now have feature 1 code, feature 2, and now I am in dev, and it is showing. Okay, so because I did a merge, I had a merge conflict, and I did have to do a merge, I'm going to save this file. Interestingly now, because I had a merge conflict, that's considered a file change and not just a commit like bringing in feature 1. Interesting. So I'm now going to stage that change, which is my merge and my commit. And now you notice there are 2 changes, pushing 2 commits. And I'm guessing the one commit is feature 2, the second one is my merge. It's different than when I pulled in feature 1. So I'm just going to hit sync. So that's pushing those changes up. So now I have feature 1 and feature 2. Now, let's do this one more time for feature 3. I'm going to go to branch, merge from feature 3. And we, again, not surprisingly, we have a merge conflict. So this is saying, well, your current change that you're bringing in is feature 3. Excuse me, your current change is feature 1 and 2. Incoming change is feature 3. And there are merge conflicts, you must resolve them. I'm going to accept both changes. Now I have feature 1, 2, and 3 all in the same file. And once again, because I had to do a merge conflict manually, I have to stage. Okay, let me hit Control S to save. And I think that gets rid of that message. Yeah, it does. So I'm saving. I'm saying, yep, I know what I'm doing. I really don't. And so I staged, and now I'm going to commit. And once again, we are showing 2 commits that need to go from dev up to our remote repository on Azure DevOps. Okay, so now I'm going to click that. It's going to push and sync, and voila. We now have taken our 3 feature branches, merged them up into dev. Now we have a current dev branch. So if I refresh this, here we have feature 1, 2, and 3. And these 3 branches have been merged into dev. So interestingly, dev is considered to be 6 merges, commits. I'm not quite sure what the term is. 6 steps ahead. You can't change these columns. That's terrible. I can't resize the columns, but anyway, it is considered to be 6 steps ahead, I'll call it, of the main branch. Now, let's say that dev compiles fine, builds fine, tests fine, everything looks good, and you have a release. And this is where I'm not as familiar with the branching strategy, but let's say that for our release, we release off of main, and only for full releases, when they're ready, will get merged into main. We build off of main, and that's our release. So we're now ready to merge dev into main. So I can go back over here. I'll choose main as my branch, and notice I don't have feature 1, 2, or 3 at all in here. Dev does. Feature 1, 2, and 3 still have their individual code, so those branches are still available if you want. But let's go back to main, and I want to merge dev into main. So let's give that a try. I'm now in main, branch, merge branch. I'm going to choose from dev, and voila, I have my changes from dev now in main, feature 1, 2, 3. Everything looks good. And because I didn't have a merge conflict, I have no file to save, no changes to stage, no changes to commit. I just have the push the commits up to Azure DevOps. So I'm going to do that. And I would think that you would not want to have merge conflicts going into main. You want to have all your merge conflicts resolved well before you're getting to main. If when I'm merging from dev to main, I have a merge conflict, I think I'd be concerned about that. I'd be a little concerned about doing merge conflicts going into main, I think. Not an expert on that, but I think I would want to get all my merge conflicts resolved at dev at a minimum, and then going from dev to main should be just as simple as what we just did. So now, if we go back here, we should see that our branches are all zeroed out because feature 1, 2, and 3 moved into dev, dev moved into main. Now main is the same as dev, and feature 1, 2, and 3. Oh, actually, look at that. I take that back. Feature 1, 2, and 3 are 4 behind. That's because feature 1 does not have 2 or 3, feature 2 does not have 1 and 3, etc. So technically those are 4 behind. And but main and dev, where are branches? Main and dev are now in sync. So I think we're good. So that's pretty cool. Okay, merge from dev branch. So that was what I was looking to do. Now this overview was pretty simplistic because I only used the UI elements of source control in Visual Studio Code. I only use the buttons and click them and the menus and the merging and everything via the UI, which looks pretty good for these types of operations. However, just like my experience with Visual Studio, when everything goes perfectly and your scenarios are simple, this will likely work. But in the real world, when you get a complex scenario, when you make a mistake, when you need to undo something, when you screw up, or when something gets merged that shouldn't have been, or something gets committed that shouldn't have been, it's not as obvious how to resolve it, especially if you're not used to doing it. So it's like, okay, there's all this stuff here. Maybe there's something here that you could do, but what I want to do is, after exploring some of these additional menus, I want to get down to the command line to see the actual Git commands that are being issued by these UI menus and buttons, because some of the language that you'll see in the UI here does not necessarily match the Git command that is being issued. And so I may use the word, sync, and maybe it's a push. And so I just want to be clear on what exactly is going on behind the scenes so that when I need to fix a problem and I screwed up, I need to know exactly how to perform that operation, which may just be via command line instead of guessing via these menus. So anyway, with that, that was episode 1 of Steve Relearning Git. We covered repos, creating a new repo, cloning to Visual Studio Code, performing commits, a sync, which I think is a push, branching, publishing, and merging. So that was pretty cool. It wasn't quite as painful as I would have thought and went pretty well and only took a few minutes of prep in advance. So what I will do next time is figure out what other Git operations I want to learn, things like stash and I'll have to see what else I can come up with for a basic learning scenario. So anyway, hope that was educational and helpful. And if there are some features about Git that you think I should explore, put a comment below and let me know. Okay, have a good one.